Water, dispense. No matter what you have planned for the plumbing in your van, we might have a few tips for you.
Now today we're going to be talking about the plumbing within our van, but we won't be diving into all the details and the installation process and all the products that we used because there are already plenty of videos out there covering it in egg nauseam.
Spell it.
E-G-G-N-O-G-Z-M. Extensively. I guess what I'm trying to say is nothing that we have in our van is all that different from what you can already find out there. Instead, we'll be focusing on a few tips and tricks I picked up while living in my first van for 3 years through some pretty bad winters, and how I incorporated all that knowledge into our new build.
And yes, we know that you can avoid all of this by just snagging yourself a jerry can and a foot pump, but we wanted to make things harder.
Fancier is what she means.
And remember, in case you've forgotten, we are not professionals, and we do not claim to be professionals.
So we cannot wait to hear all of your professional opinions. Subscribe! We've been told you have short attention spans and you won't make it past this point. It really does help. Thank you. So before we jump into our tips, here's a quick rundown of our van's current setup. The two main components that would require water were our kitchen faucet and shower. So we installed a fill gate, plumbed in a 50-gallon freshwater tank, which then ran through a strainer, a pump, and an accumulator tank. Then that ran through a 3-stage water filter, then split off into a heat exchanger to give us hot water that then ran to our kitchen faucet and ended up at our shower mixer. The entire freshwater system was ran using 1/2-inch PEX.
This is our shoreline white. This is our cold blue. And this is our hot blue, red. Then our gray water system was pretty simple. It was mainly comprised of an 1.25-inch nylon braided line with barb fittings that occasionally ran into some PVC fittings in order to connect to an inline P-trap. And finally, to our 28-gallon gray water tank. We'll dive into that a bit more later because we ran into a few mistakes.
This time around, we managed to snag ourselves a composting toilet. That means we didn't have to do a black tank. All we had to do was fresh water and gray water.
Alrighty, so let's move on to tip number 1.
Distribute your weight.
Water is heavy, and depending on how big your water tank is, it might be the single most heavy object in your van when it's totally full. So you want to make sure you place it somewhere in your van that it's not overburdening one side or the other.
So for example, the freshwater tank in this van is 50 gallons, and that's a big step up, or a decent step up, from my previous van's water tank at 33. And the reason we went larger is because there's now 2 of us, and there's 2 dogs, which means we need enough water to do things like shower and drink and cook and do dishes. We wanted to have at least about a week's worth at a time inside the van. And when you fill up that tank completely, it's about 415 pounds. And that's a decent amount of weight, especially if you plan on putting it to one side of your van, and then depending on your build out, you might be adding more weight to that side, and over time you might notice more wear and tear on that side with the brakes or the suspension, and you might even notice a change in the handling. Now, my first van, I did set the water tank to one side, but I had offset or balanced that weight by putting my entire electrical system on the opposing side, so it kind of equaled itself out. This time around, we placed our tank in between the rear wheel wells, almost right over that rear axle, to evenly distribute the weight, and we even put all of our heavy electrical system on top of that water tank. So the majority of the weight in this van is centered right in the rear. Is it gonna help us out and give us a smoother ride? I really don't know. I think it has. I feel like it drives and handles really well. Our leaf springs aren't bending down on one side more than the other. We're pretty evenly distributed. But maybe I'm full of shit. I don't know. I'm not a car guy. I'm nothing. I'm just a boy who makes videos. Okay, on to number 2.
Keeping your plumbing close together. So what do we mean by that? Imagine you have your shower on the driver's side of your van, and then you have your kitchen sink on the passenger side. And let's say your tank and your pump and your water heater are right here. That means you need to run lines from your tank through the pump and the water heater to your shower on the driver's side of your van, and then loop all the way over or back around to the passenger side of the van to eventually end up at your sink.
Now that's completely doable, and some people even run their lines underneath their flooring to get across to the other side. But the longer your runs and the more fittings you have to make turns and things like that, the harder your pump has to work. And honestly, you probably won't run into any issues with water pressure unless you manage to make some crazy maze of a plumbing system within the tiny little space that you have within your van. But the longer and more spread out your lines are, the more susceptible they are to freezing during those frigid months in the winter if you plan on living in your van full time. For example, in my first van, I had my water tank and pump placed on the rear driver's side of the van in my garage area, which was separated from the front with a divider. That ran to my water heater up toward the front of the driver's side of the van and then back to my shower, which then finally came back around into the other side of the van to my sink. Then came winter and the temps dropped well below the teens, and with the wind chill it was even colder. And even though I had a furnace for heat, all of those little areas that I had segmented off for the plumbing ended up freezing. They were blocked off. So there was a lot of cold pockets. I later added heating pads to keep the tank warm. I added additional insulation and got the lines off of the side of the van. And I even removed some of the paneling and dividers so that like the garage area could have airflow so that heat could get back there and keep everything running properly. So instead of having to deal with all of that stuff later on in the build, this time around, we made sure that all of our plumbing was on the driver's side of the van pretty close together. So close actually, the majority of it is right under our butts in this bench. So we'll show you what that looks like.
Want to check out our couch? Damn it, Rocky! Go off!
We can't show it if you're seeing.
Really? It's a circus. Go. Go. Stay.
Whoa, look at that cool aerated design.
This is our bunch. Our under bunch. It has basically our entire plumbing and hydronic system in here. And because it's so compact, we wanted to make sure that we had access to every part of the system. So we made a removable front.
Just nifty design.
And then you can see, you know, the front of our air matrix, and you can really get into our pump and our accumulator.
We've got our little filter, pump, accumulator, and that all is fed from our water tank, which has a shutoff valve, and then we have our city line, and these both come over and meet at a three-way, so we could choose whether we want to run off of the freshwater tank or like city water, which then runs into our three-stage filter, runs
Boom, boom.
down over to the heat exchanger, and also tees off and runs back. And these are our hot and cold lines that go in to the sink that we have all filled with garbage, which then runs where?
To our shower.
Show us.
Our beautiful bathroom. It is complete.
Ish.
And look, I have enough room to shave my legs, even though I really don't do that. Just as a side note, we're curious, does anyone have a good plan for waterproofing our door? Right, because we'll have the joints and the threshold here down at the bottom, and not using a shower curtain because, you know, that like clings to you.
Now this is all like a pretty tight fit, but we managed to make it work, and it's near our heat sources, which brings us to tip 3.
Keep your system warm.
So you know how I said in the last van I had to add heating pads in order to keep things warm? Well, that's not necessarily a fix, it's more like a band-aid, because if you plan on being off-grid for the majority of the time you're in your van, those aren't really efficient. They do end up pulling quite a bit of power, so if you want to run them continuously, you really need to be plugged into shore power.
In this van, we placed our entire hydronic heating system in the same area as the majority of our freshwater plumbing. That way, when our heated glycol is running through the system, through the air matrix and the heat exchanger, it'll also heat up things like our pump and our 3-stage water filter, which are pretty prone to freezing, and if they freeze, they kind of like explode and then it's busted and they're pretty expensive. We also have a heated floor system that we ran under our freshwater tank, our sink, our shower, and the couch here where we have the majority of our plumbing lines, in hopes that the radiant heat would work just like a heating pad but at a fraction of the power consumption.
Now, an elaborate hydronic heated floor system might not be in your budget, but that doesn't mean you can't keep your plumbing warm. You just have to plan accordingly. So say you have a propane furnace providing you with heat, you can always duct some of that heat to the compartment or compartments that you will be housing all of your plumbing in. That way, when you're trying to heat up the main living area of your van, you're also providing heat to all of those little compartments that are running your water.
All right, so that's your freshwater, but what about the gray water?
So in my first van, I tried an assortment of things. I tried the heated pads to keep that gray water tank warm. I tried heated lines to keep the lines warm and from freezing, and I even mixed in a bit of that RV marine antifreeze into the tank, hoping that that would also keep that water from freezing. But if it got cold enough, none of that stuff really worked well.
And since I really couldn't figure out a way to keep my lines from freezing with all those different methods, I ended up doing this. You see that right there? That's a little plug. The water coming directly from the shower, as well as the water over there coming directly from the sink, has one of these, would just drain to the ground.
It's not a solution. It just ensures that there's no like residual water sitting in the lines that might be prone to freezing. And, you know, when we do travel to places that allow for it, we could leave the plugs out and just like let our shower water go directly to the ground. It's not ideal.
And it's not
most
legal.
Most places don't allow for it.
Yeah.
But there are a few, if you check the regulations and like
BLM land that might allow it, depending on the state and the location, but you really do need to check it. Right. We're not saying just go willy-nilly with it and
dump your gray water
everywhere.
Wherever you are. And it's important to note that if you are going to do that option, like if you are going to drain to the ground, that you're using like environmentally friendly products like a camp soap that, you know, isn't going to be toxic to the soil or the groundwater.
And so this isn't a solution. It's not. It's just a way it's like a workaround, depending on where we are. Maybe you're not into snowboarding or skiing or cross-country skiing or snowshoeing.
Ice climbing.
Snowmobiling, all that fun stuff. And you just want to travel with the warm weather. You don't have to worry about any of this. But if you like doing those activities, this is an issue you might run into. And maybe you're just going to be parked in one location and you could throw like a skirt around your van and use those heated pads and lines and plug into shore power. Or maybe we could have even somehow rigged our diesel heater to this gray water system to somehow keep it all unfrozen and thawed. I don't know. We're open to anyone's ideas and thoughts, and we're curious if anyone out there has got something that works for them. Rock! What's going on?
Okay, so we are now gonna move on to a few like bonus tips. We thought we'd share these since we learned a few things from our current system and all the mistakes we made with it. So I guess this would be considered like a speed round. So bonus tip number 1. If you end up purchasing a tank that doesn't have any pre-drilled holes in it, it would be wise once you receive it to figure out where you're gonna place it within your system and then maybe pop one in. Sometimes, depending on where it's shipping and if there's like a change in elevation, that tank is either gonna like contract or expand. We purchased ours actually from a place here in Indiana, which then shipped all the way to Colorado.
While we were in Colorado.
By the time it got to us, it looked like a bloated tick. We let it sit there, and when we did finally get to put it in the van, it would not go back to its original shape. We did get it to fit the way we wanted it to. We had a small compartment for it, but we had to stand on it. Julie had to stand on it and get it in there. We had to kind of fight it. So when you get it, and if it's like sucked in or blown up, just release that pressure so it can go back to its intended shape and size. That way you don't have to fight it.
Bonus tip 2. This tip also pertains to purchasing a holeless water tank. If you are gonna use those freshwater rubber grommets for your inlet and outlet holes, make sure that you're giving yourself enough room to place the grommet off the edge of the tank, because if you go too close to the edge like we did, there's not really room for that grommet to expand once you place your PVC fitting, which is how it creates a watertight seal.
The idea was to get it as close to the edge as we could. That way we got the most out of our tank's capacity. But
we ended up with a few leaks that we had to go back then and seal up.
yeah.
Oh, we got a leak at the very first one.
So just, you know, give it a little
Don't
extra.
do what we did.
Bonus 3, have a way to check your water levels. You could do it the easy and cheaper way by just leaving your tank exposed in some way, and you can visually see the level that it's at. Or you can go a step beyond that, like we did for this van, and get the little tank sensors with the readout. These tiny little diodes that you place at different heights on your tank, which then indicate like a third full, 2/3 full, full. And there's a like little interface that you click and it'll tell you. And it also hooks up to your gray water and a black water if you have it, and even your batteries, and a nifty little pump switch on there.
You have a dog hair in your teeth. Open your mouth.
Oh,
Got it. Bonus tip number 4 is pretty specific to the Mercedes Sprinter, and it has to do with the water tank that's made specifically to fit in the spare tire rack under your van.
and it's really easy to install, which is why it has such a hefty price tag, but we managed to,
Mess it up.
yeah.
It comes with an 1.5 inch like fitting location at the top of the tank, which we thought would be perfect for our fill line because it would give us the most out of the tank's like space. The problem is when you install it, there's really not very much room left between the top of the tank and the van. So when we installed the inlet line, it kind of created a pinch there at the top.
It was almost too high, competing with the lowest point in our van. The shower drain's on the floor, and then that inlet for the gray water is like at the floor as well. So it didn't create a full siphon, and everything was just sitting in the lines or bubbling up into the shower.
So we are backing up into the shower pan, which is not good.
We ended up fixing that by putting our own hole in it, using another one of those
Rubber
grommets.
grommets on the side of the tank instead of on the top.
And guess what?
It works now.
We made the same mistake and put it too close to the edge.
So you guys may already know that, but we didn't, so
Yeah.
we figured we'd just mention it. So
Little heads up. And for the 5th and final bonus, just use quality thread tape and pipe dope for all your threaded fittings.
we had some like older thread tape and like
And the pipe dope I
accumulated.
had was old too.
You know, like the thread tape that you get when you buy a shower fitting, and they give you like the crappiest, thinnest little
Yeah, it
piece
just, like,
of thread
disintegrates in your
tape that's like
fingers.
2 rolls. We had a bunch of that, so we decided we were going to use it, and then we had a bunch of leaks.
Yeah, when we went and did our testing, we had I think like 5 or 6 leaks, and they were, every single one of them was at our threaded connections.
Yeah.
So to fix those, I just went and picked up some of that Blue Monster thread tape and pipe dope. And this stuff, it's like a lot thicker than what I had. And then this thread tape is tough stuff. You know how some cheaper thread tape, you can kind of just pull it and it crumples up real easily. It's super thin. This stuff really holds its own, and it did the trick. I just went back and redid all those fittings, and it fixed every single leak. Like I didn't
No
have to
leaks.
go back anymore. It just done. So just do that in the beginning. Use good products in the very beginning.
The extra bonus tip is just be confident that you can do it, because plumbing your van probably feels like a pretty daunting task, but just do your research, pre-plan as much as you possibly can, and go with the flow. Get it? flow.
Yeah, I think they got it. All right, we should put these back. You remember what order they went in? Blue or non?
No.
I guess we can turn them into like a Madonna bra. How does it look?
It looks unusually large.
Or we could do a new type of Devo hat. Oh, we wouldn't be able to
Bust our ceiling.
look. When the water comes around, you must clean it. Filter. Filter good.
All right, and that's it. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to us and we'll do our very best to help you. Or you can just read the comments of everyone saying that we're dumb and we don't know what we're doing, because that might help you too.
And if you're curious on any of the products that we used within our system, I'll make sure to put a link to everything within the description. So if you wanted to snag yourself any of it, you'd be able to do that there.
And you could always check out our Patreon if you're feeling extra generous.
I know we can probably be a bit more active on there, but these videos take a considerable amount of work and time. So becoming a member really does help us continue to do this. And making this content kind of makes me look like a foolish, irresponsible child not spending his time wisely and putting it all towards something that doesn't return any money. But your support helps me look a little less like that. All right, maybe I'm being a little too honest. I guess if I bullshit, we can be a bit more successful, right?
Give it a go.
I am the smartest, ripped, all-knowing, man, handsome boy. Hear my words. Will make you rich, build you a six-pack, and cure your depression. That's it. Thanks for watching.
Did that work for you? Yeah, did that work for you? Like, comment, subscribe.
See you next time.
All right.
All right, so I got a piece of metal cut off in my eye. So I'm just gonna make myself some surrounding eye protection. Doesn't have to be perfect. It's just, you know, not watertight. Yeah, looks good. Let's get back to it.
Okay, Flash.
Good thing I have the rest of my gear on to cover my body.